Kia ora koutou, and welcome everyone joining us tonight. I'm Dr Zoë Tipa here. I'm the Chief Nurse here at Whānau Plunkett, and it is wonderful to have you with us for this really important kōrero about measles. And that's, it's a disease that can spread fast and make both tamariki and whānau seriously unwell. We know that whānau have a lot of questions tonight, so we'll be talking about what's happening in Aotearoa, how you can protect your family, and we'll also be answering some of your live questions along the way. And I'm joined tonight, I'm really excited. I'm joined by someone many of you will recognise, Dr Nikki Turner from the Immunisation Advisory Centre. Nikki, thanks so much for being here, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, and thanks, Zoe. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be able to join you guys. So I'm officially the Principal Medical Advisor to the Immunisation Advisory Centre. I'm a professor in the Department of General Practice at the University of Auckland, and I'm a practicing GP currently on the Kapiti Coast. So measles is certainly the hot topic at the moment, and it's great to be able to talk about it and help people and share, and to be able to give clear advice from all of us, because there has been quite a few mixed messages out there in the media. So thanks for everyone joining tonight, and I hope we can offer some sensible advice.
Yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today. So today, as I said, we'll be discussing some of the important info about the current situation with measles in New Zealand, some frequently asked questions about measles and immunisation, and answering your questions. So please feel free to pop them in the comments or send us a private message, and we'll get to as many as we can. So I'll kick us off with the first question. Nikki, why is the current sort of case of measles such a concern?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons. Firstly, it is incredibly infectious. Like, we talk about its reproductive index number, and one person can spread to 12 to 17. If you look at flu or COVID, that's around a reproductive index of 1 or 2. So this is one of the most highly infectious viruses. If you stand in the corner of a room, it'll aerosolize and it'll catch somebody in the far corner of the room if they're not immune. So this could spread like wildfire through our community, and it's only the barrier of immunity that stops it. The second issue is it's a bloody nasty disease. And, I'm old enough, sadly, to have seen a lot of measles, and it used to infect everybody in the community. And it's a nasty disease. It gives you lots of serious side effects. Some people come off unscathed, but, up to a third of kids will get nasty side effects. In our last outbreak in 2019, a third of people ended up in hospital. And then not just the side effects of measles, but it suppresses your immune system. So if you've had measles for months and years afterwards, you tend to get recurrent infections. The death in healthy, well-nourished kids is around about 1 in 1,000, which when everyone in the population gets it is huge. You get encephalitis in about 1 in 1,000, of which a third are left with permanent damage. So this is not a disease that we take lightly. And I think the problem is our population hasn't seen enough of it to understand this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it used to be something we saw quite a lot of, wasn't it? And then it kind of disappeared, and I think that was primarily due to immunisations, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Dead clear. That's why it disappeared.
Yeah. So could you talk us through what are the symptoms of measles?
Yeah, so it sort of starts like a cold, so they come in with a runny nose and a really moist cough. And then you get very red eyes, definitely comes with a conjunctivitis. And then after that, you get a high fever, really high fever, and a blotchy maculopapular rash starts on the face, spreads over the whole body. Now, what is definitive of measles, if you see it, is these little fine white spots on the inside of the cheeks called Koplik spots that come around about a day or so before the rash. Now, just to remember, that's the florid measles. If somebody's immunised, you can get a sort of a more low-grade version of that. So you do see more attenuated disease in vaccinated, but that's what we're looking for really is look for the red eyes, look for the blotchy rash, and the high fever that goes with it.
So if someone or their child has those kind of symptoms, we'd kind of recommend that they kind of stay home and call ahead.
Yeah,
would you agree with that?
I totally agree with it, Zoe. This is the important message. If somebody thinks they might have measles, then if they're coming to see you and they're already on the way or they need to see you, ask them to stay in the car, or you need them to be in a room where nobody else is entering. If we're a fully vaccinated healthcare professional with 2 MMR doses, we're very unlikely to get it, but I recommend you should be wearing an N95 mask just to make sure. So remembering the moment somebody thinks it might be measles, then think about your PPE and your protection for yourself and your staff and everybody else.
Yeah, it's so contagious, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a little bit about the MMR vaccine. You know, what is it? What does it do? And is it effective?
Yeah. So the most important message is it's a live attenuated vaccine. So that means it's an attenuated version of the live virus. So when you give it to someone, it actually multiplies inside them. Now that's fantastic. It makes it one of the most effective vaccines we have. So for a single dose given with an effective cold chain, 95% of people will seroconvert and have long-lasting protection. 2 doses, you're up to 98, 99%. So 2 doses of MMR, almost everybody's immune long term. And if you do get measles, it's really mild and it's not likely to spread. The thing is about being live attenuated is for every of us, do not forget you cannot give it to people who have immunocompromise. Now, as we're giving it to more adults in particular, there have been a few errors where people who are on immunocompromising drugs like oncology treatment or some of these newer drugs for severe arthritises, or people who have myelomas, or, there's a lot of people walking out around there in our communities now who are immunocompromised. Do not give MMR to immunocompromised people, so we must check before we use it. These people are relying on everybody else being immunised because they're at really high risk of measles. We shouldn't also give it to pregnant women. Now, it has been accidentally given over the years to pregnant women, and there are no safety concerns, but we do not recommend giving live attenuated viruses to pregnant women. So great vaccine. We know its safety profile really well. You tend to get like 5 to 7 days later, you might get a bit of a fever. You can get what looks like really low-grade measles. Sometimes the mump bit can give you a little bit of enlarged lymph nodes. That means it's working, it means the vaccine's working and it won't be infectious and it won't spread to others. But people need to know the side effects. There are a lot of people like mid-adults who might have missed out on MMR because there were a lot of myths around MMR back in the late 1990s. I don't even want to repeat that myth because you're also familiar with it. There is no association with a lot of the stuff that was floated around on social media back in the late 1990s. We know the profile of the vaccine. You can have anaphylaxis to it. You can sometimes get ITP, low platelets. But other than that, this is an excellent vaccine, has been used for many years, and it's highly effective.
That's great. And just for those people that have that are immunocompromised, is there any other kind of alternative vaccine at the moment, or is it's purely herd immunity, really wanting people to be?
Unfortunately, it's herd immunity. Now, people have said, well, large doses of vitamin C make a difference. No. Will large doses of vitamin A make a difference? We certainly use vitamin A for people with severe measles. It does help the disease, but it's not preventive. And it's only helping. Basically, you'll end up in hospital with good, effective, amazing New Zealand hospital care treatment. What we do know internationally is kids who are malnourished, who have low vitamin A levels, giving them vitamin A really helps. But that's really because they've got a shortage of vitamin A to start. And healthy populations like New Zealand, it's not a lot of extra gain. So no, those people are relying on the rest of us to protect them.
Great. Okay, so there has been a fair amount of concern, I guess, at this time about tamariki under 12 months of age, as they're not able to get the MMR vaccine for them on the most part. Yeah,
that's right. So what we know is if you give the MMR vaccine too young, the maternal antibody that is passed to the infant intrafetal can interfere with the immune response. So New Zealand has recommended starting at a year of age. and then giving the second dose as soon as possible after the first, which is now 15 months. Now, in particular circumstances, we can give an extra dose, which is called MMR 0, to kids under a year of age. Now, we don't want to do that unless we really have a big outbreak where we need to protect kids. So currently, the recommendation is to offer MMR 0 to people with infants who are travelling to countries with a lot of measles in them, and they can get it on script from a general practice. But within New Zealand at the moment, yes, we've got cases all around the country, but the numbers are currently still quite low. And so at this stage, our public health services are saying, no, kids under 1, we're not offering MMR 0 to. It does blunt a little bit the response to MMR 1, so we prefer to wait till year of age. Now, if we start getting significant local outbreaks, the local public health services will inform us rapidly, and then we'll start recalling our kids from 4 to 12 months. But at this stage, we've just got to reassure everybody who's panicking. The best solution is, once again, like with the immunocompromised, make sure everybody around them knows their immunisation status and has had 2 MMRs. That's the best protection for our population.
Absolutely. So you've touched on that. Are there any other ways that you think we could protect our littlest ones under 12 months if they're not vaccinated?
Yeah, there's not really, again, there's not really a lot. I mean, breastfeeding is great for a whole lot of reasons, but it doesn't stop measles. But, you know, let's encourage breastfeeding, but it couldn't promise it would stop measles. The mother does give a little bit of protection to the infant when they're pregnant. So if the mother's been vaccinated, her antibodies will offer some protection to the young infant. That's why you don't tend to see severe measles in the very young infants. But of course, that only lasts a few months. But, you know, that's one thing to support a mother who's been vaccinated, to say that will give some protection to your newborn infant.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are asking, you know, should they keep their tamariki away from whānau who aren't vaccinated at the moment and or unwell at the moment? You know, is that another way to protect?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I do think this is a community responsibility message. And yes, there's not a lot of measles in New Zealand, but it's highly contagious. So I think if I had a young infant at the moment, I would be cautious about taking them around unimmunised people, particularly if they look like they're getting some sort of respiratory symptoms and you're not yet sure what they are. I think in general, you know, people with respiratory symptoms should stay away from young infants anyway. Yeah. But I do think this is not just about my individual right to vaccinate. We do need to think about protecting our whānau. So if somebody chooses not to vaccinate, that's fine, but they should stay away from people who are at high risk. And that's, you know, people with important medical issues and young infants.
Absolutely. Okay, just changing gear a little bit. How do we know if we've been vaccinated?
Yes, such a good question, isn't it? Yeah.
It sounds weird.
That is the hardest question of all. So for our children, infants and children, we've had an immunisation register now that children are enrolled from birth that goes up to about the age of 18. So if you're born in New Zealand or had health services in New Zealand, you will have your record. So anybody up to the age of 18, your health services can check the immunisation record. So that's relatively straightforward. If you've come in internationally, sometimes we have to translate the schedules. That makes it a bit hard, and sometimes it does require a bit of translation. Now, above 18, it's a mixed way of doing it. You might still have your old well-child Plunkett books, and you can go back and have a look. Anyone who's got 2 documented doses, first one from a year of age, sweet, you're okay. So you could have a look back. If you're one of the few people in the country that's been going to the same general practice forever and ever, good on you, you'll have your records there. But most of us, of course, the records are all over the place. So if you cannot find your records and it's really unclear, don't spend hours and hours and hours hunting. Recommend a further vaccine. And it's really, really safe to have an extra vaccine, because if you are immune and you've already got antibodies to measles, mumps and rubella, it'll just deactivate the vaccine so that you don't actually get any side effects, except you have to put up with a needle. So it's better to have another vaccine. We are not recommending blood tests and serology. They cost money. They're hard to interpret. We are really only saving those for the really high-risk people who can't have a vaccine. And if they were in contact with a measles case, What we can do for those people is offer them passive immunoglobulin. So that is the one protection we do offer people who've been in contact with a measles case, who are at high risk and haven't been able to be vaccinated. So, yep, another vaccine. If you can't find your records, stop hunting now and just get another vaccine.
Absolutely. So we've had a question come through around the same lines. The community nurse did my kids' immunisation, however, unable to find my son's records. Can I get them to do it again?
Yeah, really sorry for your son. That means another needle. My apologies. Get it done again, okay? Support your son to get it done again. As I say, the safety profile of having an extra dose is great. So the first vaccine always has the highest profile of reactions, because then you've got antibodies, and it's better to have another one than keep looking for records when you're not sure.
So just on how and where to book an MMR vaccine or immunisation.
Right. Well, Zoe, you might be able to talk about the plunking end of that. I would just talk about the other areas. You can obviously get one through your general practice. Lots of pharmacies nowadays, and the Healthy NZ book online. But Zoe, you could probably add more in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I know, our Plunket immunisation sites are up in 20 locations around the country. So feel free to go and check out our website to find a clinic near you, or call our admin line. And that's for the whole whānau as well. Anyone can go in and get an immunisation there at our Plunket immunisation sites. We've just had another couple of questions come through back to our previous point, and I think people are quite interested. If I don't know my vaccination status and get vaccinated again, just confirming I'm not infectious and will not pass it on to unvaccinated tamariki. If I don't know my
that's really correct. So, we do know that like 5 to 7 days after a vaccine, you might get what looks like an attenuated mild measles reaction. That does not spread, okay? It does not spread. You're not going to pass it on to your tamariki. So you're absolutely fine. No concerns.
Yeah, cool. And someone else here, if I'm not sure if I've had 2 doses and I take another vaccine dose now as a breastfeeding mother, does that antibody transfer to my baby?
Yeah, really not a lot. Sorry. I think once again, though, if you've had vaccines before you were pregnant and you've got some antibodies, your baby will have antibodies that you got when the baby was a fetus. That's the most effective transfer, is intrafetal. Not a lot through breast milk, but hopefully you've given baby some antibodies intrafetal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've touched on this a little bit before, but we'll just go back to it because it's something that we hear quite frequently. When whānau say that they had measles when they were a child, it wasn't a big deal. What are we worried about, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
look, I want to stand strong on this one, Zoe. Sorry to come across you. I worked in low-income countries when I was younger. I worked in wards where 50% of the kids were dying of measles. Now, a lot of those were malnourished, but then I worked in countries where they weren't malnourished, and you're still seeing masses of kids die. Every kid pretty well got measles. 1 in 1,000 died. That's a huge amount of kids. And then, about a third of the kids getting measles get diarrhea, pneumonia, all sorts of stuff afterwards, encephalitis, brain damage. And then they go on for months and years afterwards they've got weakened immune systems. The measles virus actually deletes a lot of the pre-existing immunity, and they get sick repeatedly. And so, having witnessed that, it's like, sorry guys, this is not a mild disease. You can't tell me that. Sorry, I just had something strong there.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the thing, right? And people, so it's hard to talk about something that we don't see, sometimes, and it's just until you live it. Sometimes it's hard to resonate. There's a question here: is the MMR vaccine safe? Does it shed?
No, it doesn't shed. Yeah, it is safe. Well, it's got a good safety profile. As I said earlier, it does have side effects. You can have anaphylaxis to it. Now, there used to be a worry about egg allergy, but that's not the issue. The anaphylaxis is usually to components in the vaccine like gelatin or neomycin. People with egg allergies are fine to have it. It's actually grown on chick fibroblast cells, not actually an egg. So it's not quite like the flu vaccine. And it does have, you can get unwell in a high fever 5 to 7 days later, but it is not infectious. And that's the really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think now is natural immunity superior to immunization in terms of resistance?
It's a really good question with MMR. So for most vaccines, natural immunity tends to be more vigorous, broader, and longer lasting than vaccine immunity. With measles, it probably is, but the power of this vaccine is because it's live attenuated, it replicates inside you. Your immune response with a live attenuated vaccine is it's identical to the response to a wild measles. So it's probably pretty similar. Now, I wouldn't say this for other vaccines, but with the MMR, it's a brilliant vaccine. That's why once you've had 2 doses, you're pretty well presumed immune, except you might get very mild breakthrough for most of your life. And that's the same with measles, you're pretty well immune for life, but you could potentially get very mild again. So, pretty similar in this case, really.
Yeah, thanks for that. Another question around, can measles be prevented? You've already mentioned this before. Just to reiterate, measles can't be prevented or treated with large doses of vitamin A or vitamin C?
No. Sorry. But remembering high-risk people who are exposed, we do offer passive immunoglobulin too. It's not exactly treatment, but it's to try and soak up the measles virus. And the other thing is New Zealand Health Services are amazing. And with the big outbreak in 2019, where we had over 2,000 cases, we had the privileged position of getting close. We lost a fetus, but we didn't actually have any other actual deaths. So New Zealand Healthcare Services at propping people up are amazing. But, you don't want to end up in ICU being ventilated to get your way through measles.
No, that's right. And if the health system's responding to all of that work in measles, then what else is dropping off as well?
Yeah, exactly. That's the worry, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. A practical question: what should I do if someone in my whānau catches measles? And including, how do I look after my child if they've got measles?
Right. Now, firstly, instantly somebody should notify the local medical officer of health. The health services should do that. The local public health services come in and give you really good advice about how managing in the house. Now, if you yourself have got 2 MMRs, then you can be reasonably relaxed. They do advise wearing masks around the house and trying to keep social distancing. But if you've had 2 MMRs of your family, you're fine. If you've got a kid under a year of age, then you really do want to distance them from the person with measles. Now, in cases like that, they will offer MMR younger than a year of age as well. So really, as soon as somebody's got measles or look like they're getting measles, you need to reach out for help, because if they're really little babies, they'll offer them immunoglobulin to protect them. And if they're a bit older and you get it in within a few days of contact, you can actually have an MMR vaccine for the little kids. So when you're in contact with measles, they'll rack up all the support around vaccination, immunoglobulin, and the best social distancing you can do, which is pretty tricky for a lot of our whānau.
Absolutely. And then it's just sort of comfort cares, I guess.
Yeah, it's fluid and comfort cares. That's right. It's fluids. It's a bit like, it's a respiratory illness. So you manage it like another respiratory viral illness, Lots of fluids, comfort cares. They often do give vitamin A as well. It does have a place in it. But it is. You're just managing a respiratory illness where we don't have an antiviral that's effective.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So moving on to some questions that have come in from whānau specifically. From Beethan. We have a 4-month-old son. Myself, whānau, and close friends are fully MMR vaccinated, but our son is not. Should the vaccine dose 0 become available for him, we would vaccinate him. We're avoiding public places with our PP, but are unsure if it's safe for us to attend baby groups such as Space or Play Centre, Baby Sensory, and antenatal mum catch-ups.
It's really hard at the moment, isn't it? Because at the moment there's only about 17 cases throughout the country. And normally the public health people are letting you know where the cases are. So if that whānau is in an area quite close by where cases are an outbreak, then yeah, you really want to be cautious in public places for that baby. But on the whole, most of New Zealand right now is not in those areas. So really, it's like watching closely what the local public health services are saying. And if you're not in your geographic locality, then you're okay to go out and go to your groups and places. But if it looks like it's in your geographical locality, then be cautious for a baby. And I'm hoping and I believe that the public health services in every area should be actively letting people know and keeping their websites up to date. If you're not sure, ask your general practice or Plunkett to find out for you. You know, they can find out where the latest cases of measles are and they'll be let know on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, because it's just, you know, that while we're in that kind of in between, or if there's going to be an outbreak, a big outbreak or not, we need to just keep an eye on kind of where.
Yeah, it's really hard for people, because we want to be warned and ready, but we don't want to stop people living. So it's always that difficult balance. So, you know, our public health services need to let us know and are doing when there's local outbreaks. Until that stage, you know, that whānau, getting everybody around the infant vaccinated is the way to go.
Bethan has another question as well. We've got domestic trips planned at the end of the month to visit whānau and friends. Is it safe to fly with a 4-month-old? We're considering cancelling these trips. It's the same kind of.
It's the same kind of thing. It depends where you're flying, but I'd say right now your risk on a single flight is very low. Okay, but watch week to week how it's going and where you're flying from and to. You know, at the moment numbers are still low, so we just have to have a high radar. Don't cancel your flights yet. You know, but yeah, it's reasonable to be very aware of that.
Yeah, it's great that people are looking out.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't want to freak everybody out. So look out and be sensible. And just remembering, if there is a problem and your 4-month-old does come in touch with measles, we do offer them protective immunoglobulin as a backup, just so that you know that, you know, there is another option too if really something goes wrong.
Okay, here's one from D. If both parents are vaccinated and have the MMR vaccine and one parent is working in a city where there are measles cases and somehow is unexpectedly exposed to measles, are they likely to catch it and are they likely to pass it on to their baby?
So we've very occasionally had people who have had 2 MMRs getting mild measles. And interestingly, we've had a couple that have had mild measles and have not spread them within the family. So it is theoretically possible that a fully vaccinated person can catch mild measles and can spread it, but it's much, much, much lower rate. So once you do know you've got measles, even if you're fully vaccinated, yes, we'd suggest social distancing and all the usual advice. But on the whole, you know, you're pretty low risk in the family of that particular situation.
Here's one from Jenny. I have a 3-month-old baby. I have a record of receiving 1 MMR jab, but we're unsure if I got a second dose. I was tested for rubella immunity during pregnancy. I was found to be immune. Does that imply I did get the second jab, and does it suggest I'd also be immune to measles?
Sadly, Jenny, no and no. So rubella is actually even more effective in the MMR than measles. So if you've had 1 MMR, 97%, nearly 98% of people seroconvert to rubella. So being rubella positive means, yep, you've had 1 dose, but it doesn't mean you're seroconverted to measles. You'd have to check that separately. It doesn't mean you've seroconverted to mumps either. So sadly, we can't rely on the rubella measure in pregnancy as a measure for measles. So the answer is you'll still need a second dose once you're through the pregnancy.
Yeah. Someone else has sort of got a similar along the similar lines. If you've had blood tests while pregnant, would they show immunity?
Yeah, so they're only doing blood tests for rubella in New Zealand. They don't do blood tests for measles. The other problem is, even if we did do measles blood tests, what we call a correlative protection, like the absolute amount that protects you, is not that clear. So it's actually quite hard to interpret. So it would give you an idea if you had protection, but it's not absolute. So no, you don't get the blood test for measles, and if you did, it wouldn't be that clear anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Steph's got a question. What precautions can I put in place for a 4-month-old who's starting care at 5 months?
Yeah, so I'd really like to know in the care centre, the immunisation status in the care centre now.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the traditional immunisation records presenting at the care centres is not the case anymore, and I'm sad about that. But I think you can validly go to the creche, preschool, kohanga and say, for the sake of my young infant, I want to know if the caregivers, the adults around them, and all the infants over 1 are vaccinated, because then that'll ring protect our infants. And I think it's totally valid to say, I want to know if the caregivers for my infant are vaccinated. I think that would be an ethical thing to do, really. I think it's an occupational issue that anybody working with infants under 1 year, ethically for their occupation, should be vaccinated.
So be brave, go and ask the questions. Yeah.
You can say, I asked you to, because it's a hard thing to do, eh? But it is really important to protect our infants under 1, and the way to protect them is the wall of immunity around them.
Yeah.
So, and it's a community issue. So this is a really hard thing to do, but I think it's a good thing to do, because a lot of our preschools, kohangas are onto this as well, and they'll be as receptive as
sure.
parents are concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Who have we got? Erica. What are the drawbacks of getting dose 0? You've kind of touched on this already, but dose 0 in addition to dose 1 and dose 2 at the correct time. I heard that taking dose 0 in addition results in reduced immunity long term. Would this mean taking additional vaccinations as an adult, or is the effect negligible?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. So the data internationally is really mixed, and actually the WHO has just reviewed it, and it's not clear. It looks like dose 0 can slightly interfere with the antibody response to dose 1, but not to dose 2, just so a little bit. But it doesn't interfere with the cellular response. So we still know if somebody's had 0, they have 1 and 2, they look like they get a really secure immune response. But the data is a bit mixed. And the other reason it's a bit mixed is in other countries where people have had measles, the antibody levels are higher because they had measles previously. So it's very hard to interpret the data. All I can say is that if you get dose 0, we're pretty confident that you need 2 doses after a year of age, and you still should have long-term immunity. But you had 1 dose, you could get a bit of interference.
Yeah, that would be the danger, I guess, is that people kind of forget to do the other 2 or
that's
the
it.
other 2. Yeah,
that's right. So you really need the second dose if you've had dose 0.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, Meg's here. My 10-week-old is fully breastfed. How protected is she from my immunisation? So, that question again. And do you recommend getting a top-up vaccine for myself to support her further?
Oh, no, it's a lovely idea, eh? So breastfeeding is perfectly safe with the MMR. You might get a little bit of antibody. You don't get the antigen, really. The infant's not going to have a response. There's potentially a very weak possibility, but the infant doesn't have a response to your vaccine, and the infant gets maybe a little bit of antibody, but not a lot. So if you did have a further vaccine, you're not going to offer a lot of it through the breast milk. I'd like to say you would, but you're not. But, if you need another vaccine, go for it. It's a good thing to do, because I think the bigger gain from having another vaccine is you're less likely to bring measles into your infant. I think that would be the most important. But don't give up the breastfeeding. It's fabulous.
No, that's right. I was going to say, go you with the breastfeeding.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So Monique's asking, her baby's getting his 1-year jab tomorrow. Is he protected straight away?
Oh, good question. We say within 2 weeks. It takes a good 2 weeks to mount the immune response. If you think of the fact that it takes about 5 to 7 days before the vaccine's really kicking in and having an effect, and it'll be another few days after that. So really, you've got a good couple of weeks before you're sure you've had some effect.
Yeah. So Cindy's got a similar one. Her baby is scheduled to get his 12 months vaccination on the 5th of December after turning 1, and will travel overseas 4 flights on the 28th of December. So will it be safe enough for baby after the first dose to travel? And
I think, what are you, 21 days, a few more, more than 3 weeks. Yeah, look, they say a month, but honestly, after 2 to 3 weeks, you've got reasonable protection.
Sounds good.
I don't know when your baby turns 1, but we say plus or minus a few days. So even if you pulled it forward a couple of days, we don't recommend before 1, but it wouldn't be a problem if you vaccinated a couple of days before 1, if you just wanted to give yourself a bigger window.
Yeah. Cindy wants to know also about the side effects. Is that likely to happen in that initial window, or will it, happen
So
after?
the side effect profile is usually somewhere between 5 to 7 days. So, if you are traveling, remember that if you've just had MMR, you don't want to be sitting on a plane 7 days post MMR and your infant gets a high fever and a rash. And importantly, remember that toddlers with a high fever can sometimes get febrile convulsions. So be aware that it's not a day or two after an MMR. It's different from other vaccines. It's like 5 to 7 days after that you get the side effects. So you really want to be a bit prepared for that. And you don't want to start, going off into the bush a week later.
No, sounds like a lot of planning ahead in some.
Yeah, bit of planning ahead. Mums are used to that, I know.
Typical parenting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good luck, everybody.
This question's from Breeze. I'm vaccinated but pregnant and also have a 9-month-old. Are we at high risk if we were to come into contact with someone with measles?
If you've had 2 vaccines before you're pregnant, you're in a really good position. And so, no, you're pretty safe. Again, your 9-month-old is at risk because the antibody protection you'd offered them is now worn off. So, yes, your 9-month-old's at risk, but you are very unlikely to be. So you can be pretty reassured. And it's the same old messaging about looking after kids under a year of age. Hopefully most of the whānau and friends and preschool around you are vaccinated to protect the 9-month-old.
Yeah, absolutely. Sapphire says this is weird. She just checked her files and says that she got MMR2 when she was 4, but there's no record of a first dose. She's asking, would it be safe to assume I'd already received another dose prior?
Sadly, no, because we're not always brilliant at healthcare professionals about getting our documentation right. So sadly, if you can only find documentation of 1 dose, even if it says 2, I think you're better safe off having another one. You might be okay, but I just know that sometimes when we enter it, it might have been just entered as 2 and it was actually 1. And if you can't find the other record, you're safer to have another one.
Yep. This is from Alicia. Awanui Labs are offering a blood test to check for measles that you can pay for independently. Does that give reliable results?
No, don't bother. It will give you some results and some indication, but it's not that clear. And it's much easier just to make sure you've had 2 documented doses. So honestly, save your money. And also, we want to use those lab tests for severely immunocompromised who can't have MMR. Those are the ones that we need to figure out how protected they are. So, I'd suggest no, this is not a good use of money.
Yeah. So you just suggest people go and get another MMR.
And as I said before, if you're already immune, then you're not going to get side effects from the next MMR. And that's the thing people need to be reassured about. It's not going to give you extra side effects, this one.
Yep. Okay. We've got a couple more questions, I think, from Ella. My daughter is starting daycare a few days after her first birthday. She'll get the vaccination around that time. Should I delay her start at daycare to account for the 2 weeks for it to be protective?
Yeah, good question. I think once again, if your daycare is really responsible and all the adults in the daycare are fully vaccinated, then I'd be confident. If you're not confident about that, then you might want to wait a couple of weeks to be safe, depending on what part of the country you're in. If you're in a part of the country that we've seen some measles, then you might potentially want to delay. But I'm hoping most of the daycares are pretty responsible about this, and then you'd be quite confident if you had all the adults vaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting question from Tash. Grandparents have born pre-1969, or some grandparents were born pre-1969, and were told they aren't in the target group for vaccinations, and they're unsure if they had 2 vaccinations and can't recall if they've had measles as children. Should they get another?
Yeah. This is a really good question. So the rule of thumb is that before 1969, measles was endemic in New Zealand, so everybody saw it. So you would be a very rare beast to have lived in New Zealand as a child prior to 1969 are not seeing measles. So that's presumed immunity. And the proof's in the pudding. In our last outbreak, we saw no cases of people over 70 at all, and very occasional cases of people in their late 50s, early 60s. So what we're saying is people born prior to 1969, you're almost all immune. And now, interestingly, even if you're born in another country, most of the vaccination programs start at the same time or earlier. So on the whole, people are protected, but it does vary a bit country to country. So my general rule of thumb is, if you're older than 70, we're just not seeing measles, you're okay. If you're somewhere between mid-50s and 70, if you were born in New Zealand around that time, you're probably fine and protected. If you're born somewhere else, was there measles around at the time, and when was the vaccine introduced? So there's a little bit of wiggle room from mid-50s to 70, but honestly, over 70, we've not seen anybody with measles, so you can be pretty chilled about that. So allow grandparents to cuddle babies, unless they've got respiratory illnesses, and then don't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I think that we've got to the end of our questions that have come through. I think, yeah, I think that's about it. So,
cool.
Yeah, just to reiterate, where you can go to get immunised. So absolutely, you can pick up the phone and contact Plunkett to find out where our clinics are. But absolutely contact your local GP. There's plenty of opportunities. Everyone's out there trying to make sure that everyone has the most access they can to the MMR vaccination. And any other sort of tips from you, Nikki?
No, I just think have confidence that we do know this vaccine, we understand it, we know its risk profile. And, for the majority of us, unless there's a really compromised immune system, it's a fabulous vaccine. And the world does not need to see measles. If we have enough people vaccinated, measles goes away. It doesn't live anywhere else. So we should get rid of measles from our world. We can do it. And, collectively together, we can do it. And we need confidence about that.
Kia ora. So, ngā mihi nui, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise tonight. We're very privileged to have you with us. And a big thank you also to everyone who's tuned in, who's asked questions, engaged with this kaupapa, helped us keep this kōrero going. If there's one message to take away, it's that measles spreads fast, but it's preventable. And what we know, 2 doses of the MMR vaccine give the best protection for you and your tamariki and your whānau. So, again, you can find trusted information and clinic locations on our website. We've shared the links in the comments. Call Plunkett line anytime, 0800 933 922, if you want to talk about what immunisation looks like for your whānau. So, kia ora koutou, Paul Māori, stay safe. Thank you for joining us. And ka kite anō.
Ka kite, kia ora.